talk now about revenue operations and how you can get leverage out of the RevOps team.
They measure every facet of the business for us, giving us the data that we need to inform every decision that we make. And so as you think about every facet of the pipeline and the market that we're going after and delivering back to the sellers and the sales managers, all the information they need to forecast accurately. And so what I'd say the RevOps team has been able to do for us, most importantly, is create a predictable business and therefore be able to continue to invest in new and different things in our business.
Your revenue team is constantly changing, whether it is expanding into new markets, adding new departments or teams under the revenue umbrella, or acquiring a new company. Expecting your go-to-market motion to stay the same through all that change is a recipe for revenue leak, silently draining away potential growth and leaving your business vulnerable. You can stick with what you've been doing, the comfortable and familiar, or do you embrace the change? While it seems safer to maintain the status quo, it comes at a cost. With buyer preferences and processes shifting, what worked before, even for your best sellers, might now be met with frustration. Making changes to your go-to-market strategy is not simple, but challenging your internal status quo and embracing innovation is something today's guest knows a lot about. Kiva Kolstein is the president and CRO of AlphaSense, meaning he spends time thinking about both the strategy and execution of his go-to-market team. Over the past 6 years, he's grown his team 25x by continuously evolving his go-to-market structure. Make sure you stay tuned to learn about the go-to-market incubator that Kiva and his leadership team have to accelerate growth even more.
I'm Kyle Coleman, sales pro turned SVP of marketing at Clary. Run Revenue is the show where revenue pros learn to stop revenue leak, achieve revenue precision, and grow their companies and careers.
This is Run Revenue Show with Kyle Coleman.
All right, everybody, welcome to today's episode of the Run Revenue Show. I'm so excited to be joined today by my friend Kiva Kolstein from AlphaSense. Kiva, how you doing?
I'm great. I'm thrilled to be here. Good morning to you.
Let's jump right into it. We're going to be talking a lot about the go-to-market evolution that you've made happen over your time at AlphaSense. But first, prime the pump a little bit. Give us the 2-minute overview of yourself, where you've been, and then tell us a little bit about your current role.
Sure. Well, I live in Chappaqua with my wife and 3 kids, a dog and a cat. That's a little bit about me. In terms of where I've been, I think that the best place to sort of start it is, or maybe the most relevant experience is my time at GLG. So in 2006-07, I was hired to start their corporate markets division and spent about 6 years building corporate markets for Gerson Lammer Group for GLG before leaving there to join a company called Percolate as their head of sales and chief growth officer. We grew that until we sold it to Seismic. Left there to become the CRO of a company called Handshake, which we sold to Shopify. And for the last 6 years, I have been at AlphaSense. And we'll talk a lot about that, I'm sure.
That is quite a little rundown there. So you've been part of how many acquisitions now? Was that 2 or 3 that I heard?
2 acquisitions.
Not bad. And now you've been at AlphaSense. You're the CRO and president at AlphaSense. You've been there for about 6 years. Is that right?
That's right.
And so tell us about the company and specifically with a focus on the go-to-market strategies that you have. Last time we spoke, you mentioned you have 2 kind of pretty disparate go-to-market strategies. So curious to hear more about the way that you're structured.
Yeah. So just by way of background, AlphaSense is an AI-powered search engine. So think Google for business that sits on top of tens of thousands of sources of previously disparate content. So all this content lives in this platform. Content like sell-side research from every bank and SEC and global filings, earnings call transcripts, transcribed call expert interviews, press releases, news, all that content sits in our platform, layered upon which is an AI-powered search engine that enables you to find the very specific thing that you're looking for more quickly than you could anywhere else. And so we sell access to the platform and all of the content within the platform to 2 sets of users, if you will. Financial services,
Yep.
so hedge funds and private equity firms and banks and asset managers buy access to the platform. And the other side of our business, we sell to large corporations and consultancies. And so while the go-to-market strategy is somewhat the same in terms of the teams built to support the sellers who are selling into those markets, the way we think about articulating value and the personas that we're selling to are very different depending on the kind of company that we're selling into.
So you have this verticalized approach. You mentioned the financial firms and then the corporates that you're selling to, but I think you also have this persona based approach, the way that you've structured your go-to-market team. How are you thinking about how to sell to specific personas?
Yeah, we spent a great deal of time thinking about the very specific value that we need to articulate to a person in a very specific role or function. So a strategy executive at a pharmaceutical company, for instance, gets different value or extracts different value from our platform than does a corporate development executive at an energy company or an analyst at a hedge fund. And so over the last 6 years since I've been here, we spent a great deal of time and energy training the team on how to communicate the value of the platform by persona, by vertical, by sub-vertical, by geography. And so we're a hyper specialized or verticalized sales force.
It's pretty impressive, and you've got this down to a science, it sounds like, but I know that, Rome wasn't built in a day, and nor was AlphaSense's go-to-market structure. So president and CRO, we're going to talk a little bit about the distinction between those two different functions that you're serving at the company. We'll get there in a minute, but take us back in time, 6 years ago. The go-to-market can't have been as dialed as it is today. So that's the topic of today's show, is how can a go-to-market strategy evolve? And curious for you to go back to the Mesozoic days and talk to us about before all the evolution had happened. Like, what did you inherit? And then talk us through the journey and maybe some of the aha moments that you've had over the last 6 years.
Great. Yeah. Extraordinary growth over the last 6 years, both in terms of the way we think about taking the product to market and just the sheer size of the organization. What I inherited was a 20-ish person team, a company doing about $10 million in ARR. And just to give you a sense of scale, my team is now 500 people and the organization 1,300 people and well over 100 million ARR. And we raised over $600 million in funding. And so just extraordinary growth of the last 6 years. When I joined, AlphaSense was selling the platform fairly generically. And so we had a great product and a good demo, and we would show up to client meetings, no matter the type of client, no matter the persona that we were meeting with, and show them the same demo and hope that the sophisticated buyer on the other end would recognize the value of the platform, the value of the demo, or recognize the value of the platform through the demo and buy. And they did on occasion. And so we got a lot of false positives because we had these fantastic logos buying access to our platform. But when we peeled the curtain back a bit, what we recognized was that we were woefully underpenetrated everywhere. So every one of our customers had bought a few seats here or there, but none of them were buying in bulk. None of them were buying additional seats over time. And so we had to think about a different, more specialized strategy, recognizing that in order to get the sophisticated buyer on the other end to really recognize the value of the platform, we had to make it as though it were purpose-built for the buyer. And so it started at the tip of the spear, started with the SDR and the AE and the AM, but it extends to marketing and product and content. In our case, you had to have an entire organization purpose-building this platform for all of the unique buyers or prospective buyers. And so that's the evolution of the organization, and we're not even done. But it's taken us 6 years to really get good at training sellers on how to communicate the value by persona, by vertical, by sub-vertical. And in order to do that, you've got to speak the language of the customer. And in AlphaSense's case, the best of our sellers, or what we've trained our sellers to do really well, is connect the dots between what's going on in the world, what's going on in an industry, what's going on within a company, and what's going on at the contact level, right? So COVID impact on supply chain for glass manufacturing, how that impacts the automotive industry and specifically GM and Ford, and what their strategy executives are doing to account for, right? And that's just sort of like off the top of my head, but against every single vertical and sub-vertical. So life sciences being the vertical, pharma, biotech, device being sub-verticals. And then within those, of course, all the unique personas that we're selling to. So how do you connect those dots really quickly for your prospects and customers? And that's what we spent most of our time training the team on.
This is amazing, Kiva. And that insight that you just gave is worth its weight in gold. You said you have to be able to explain everything from what's going on in the world to the industry, to the company, to the contact, and all those different levels of insight your sellers have to be trained on. That's the expectation that buyers have now. And if your sellers are sitting in a room and they don't have a POV on all of those four things, you're going to lose. It's just not going to happen.
That's right. And it's unreasonable to believe that anyone can get that specific and be able to connect those dots across every sector of the economy. And so you really do have to begin to focus your team on one or two sectors, one or two verticals, so they can spend their time really understanding that vertical and what may be happening in the world that is impacting that industry.
I'm really glad you said that, Kiva, because a lot of times companies or go-to-market strategists will say, we need to, let's just say, get out of tech and get into non-technical industries. And they try and bite off every non-technical industry under the sun as if it's all the same. And it obviously is not. And so how did you decide where to start? How did you know where to focus the lasers first? And what'd you do, one industry at a time, or did you try and tackle two, or what was your approach?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So AlphaSense was built initially to serve hedge funds. And so what I inherited when I joined the company was a platform designed for financial services and specifically hedge fund. And so the first place we went was other financial services firms who also require access to the same kind of content. And so you think private equity and banking and asset management. As we moved into corporations, I think it was a bit of a test and see, right? So we had a few sellers who agreed to move from financial services sales to corporate sales. And they began meeting with companies, I believe, life sciences, pharma specifically. We were exposing strategy and competitive intelligence and investor relations folks inside these large corporations to content that they didn't even know they could have access to. I think that was the first aha moment for us, was this recognition in the meeting with our corporate prospect that we were introducing something to them that they didn't even know they could get. And that, I think it probably began in life sciences, but it very quickly moved into energy and industrials and CPG and TMT and every sector. And so fast forward 5 or 6 years, and we've got thousands of customers across every vertical, and none of them higher performing than the other, all of them sort of needing access to this kind of content. And specifically broker research, aftermarket research that comes out of big banks who are writing about themes and trends and markets and topics and tickers. And so giving the corporate markets access to this kind of content was really novel.
It's super interesting. So to play it back and to make sure I have it right, the way that you started is, if you're looking at a target, you have the bullseye at the center of the target, which was your hedge funds. You said, okay, if this target is financial services writ large, center of the bullseye is hedge funds. We're going to start there and we're going to go as deep as we possibly can because that's our fastest path to revenue right now. And then we're going to explore the rings around the center of the bullseye, other, sub-industries within financial services, and continue to take the personas that we feel like we have a pretty good sense of and find other ways to leverage that inside the same large industry. And then once we figure that out, then we can go and make bets into new industries. What other kind of adjacent industries are looking and acting and talking like the folks that we've already sold with? And we can sort of evolve, not change or create a whole new, but evolve our value prop to fit those new industries. Is that a fair summary of how you've grown up?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think it's a team effort. It can't simply be the revenue organization that has made the decision to sell by vertical or persona. You've got to have sort of this joint effort alongside marketing. Like when you think about how do we introduce AlphaSense into these new verticals or sub verticals, you do have an SDR and AE who are calling on a company, but you've got to support them with marketing material. In our case, we want a product that looks as though it was purpose built for that strategy executive inside of that kind of company. And so product matters, the skin, packaging. When you think about content, what we're selling is content within this platform. And so the content has to matter. If you're talking to an energy executive, there has to be content that person is accustomed to or regularly consuming inside of our platform that will make AlphaSense matter to them. And so it's content and product and marketing, and of course, sales, who all have to sort of come together to think about how do we take this platform, this product to that market. And I think that's been the evolution of our overall go-to-market strategy of the last 6 years.
I'm really glad you said that. And the way that I hear a lot of folks think about it, and it sounds like you do too, is your go-to-market strategy is a combination of three things. And this is overly simplified, but just for the sake of conversation, it's your sales strategy, marketing strategy, and product strategy. Those are each legs of the triangle, and that is a complete go-to-market strategy that can allow you to go and do something in a way that's going to be effective. I think the mistake that a lot of people make is they say, oh, we're going to foray into a new industry and it's going to be a sales-led effort. We're going to put an SDR and we're going to put an AE against it and we'll see what happens. Well, guess what? If I get an outbound email from an SDR who says something about how you can support healthcare life sciences, and I go to alphasense.com and there's nothing on there about how you support my industry, there's no chance I move forward. So of course there needs to be a marketing component to this. And then the product side is the same way. You've mentioned this before. You've said this phrase a couple of times, purpose-built platform for the industry. I think that's a really important insight. And if your product team isn't in lockstep in developing the roadmap or developing the product capabilities that are purpose-built for that industry, the whole thing's going to fall flat.
I mean, it includes pricing, right? As we moved from financial services to corporations to consultancies, that's a whole different set of customers that we sell to and think about how to articulate the value to. And part of that is a pricing model that is different than corporates or financial services because consultancies, big strategy consultancies, operate in a slightly different way, right? They've got clients and they're serving clients on very specific projects. And many times they're billing back to their clients the hours they work on that project. And so how do you engage with a tool like AlphaSense on behalf of your customer? Well, we had to build a pricing model to support that need. So that's just another example of like pricing and packaging and customer segmentation and verticalizing and entering new markets and bolting on new products are all the kinds of things that we're thinking about over the course of the last 6 years. And of course, still today.
That's exactly right. Talk to us a little bit, Kiva, about your org structure. As a CRO, do you have marketing rolling into you or do you have a separate CMO? How are you structured?
Yep. We have a separate CMO. She's fantastic. So marketing rolls up into Melissa Sargent, our CMO. And so we work really closely together and the teams work really closely together. But my organization is sales, service, strategy, which includes RevOps and sales enablement. And maybe I'm missing some, but it's sales and service.
Your team will listen to this and they will let you know who you left off that list. I promise you, I get that all the time. So let's talk about the enablement and ops. You just mentioned those two key functions on your team. And when we were talking a couple of weeks back, Kiva, you mentioned that you're constantly looking for areas of leverage across the organization. And certainly when you have such a bespoke approach to go to market for all these different industries, verticals, personas, and things like that, you need to find leverage because, as you said, you can't expect a single seller to know every single thing they have to know about all these different folks and verticals that they're going to be targeting. So talk to us about how you can find leverage out of enablement and how you can find leverage out of revenue operations. I understand they're two very different topics, but would love to hear your thoughts.
They're different topics, but they're actually both secret weapons. Maybe the most critical functions for scaling a global sales organization. And I think any CRO needs to spend considerable time thinking about how to build out each function and have that function support the team. So let's start with sales enablement. Sales enablement, the team at AlphaSense is now 10 people, supporting a 500-person revenue organization. And they're broken up by the part of the sales cycle that they focus on. So think pre-sales, sales, post-sales. We've got sales enablement folks who are dedicated to that portion of a customer's journey, if you will. And then by role. So folks who are responsible for helping SDRs, AEs, AMs. We have conversion specialists and adoption specialists. And there are sales enablement folks who are responsible for supporting those very specific functions inside of our revenue organization. And what they're doing is basically what you described. As we enter a new market, as we articulate value to a new persona, as we think of a new competitor and how we differentiate from that competitor, as we think about what may be happening in the world. Right now, we're an AI-powered search engine, so Gen AI and ChatGPT is the hot topic. And not only do our sellers and our revenue organization need to understand what it means and how to respond to questions that we get from customers about how we may be taking advantage, but also how we may be taking advantage and how our product development cycle will change as a result of incorporating Gen AI into our search, into our platform. And so that's just like a real-time example of how sales enablement jump right in and begin to build trading around. But it's everything from master classes in cold calling techniques to negotiation and territory management, time management. And so I can't speak highly enough. And I mean, the sales enablement function has allowed me and the management team to focus on serving our reps and serving our customers in a much more strategic way. We lean on them for really almost everything we need in accelerating the speed to productivity for a new hire and getting to, more productivity for our existing sellers, capital S.
Yeah, super helpful. We'll move into operations here in a second, but I feel the same exact way about enablement. I own enablement at Clary right now, and I feel the exact same way. I actually heard the CEO recently talking about the usefulness of enablement at his company, and he said, look, as we scale, we don't need 100 Picassos out there charting a new way to create a beautiful masterpiece in their sales strategy or sales process. We need standardization, we need scale, we need best practices for every single point of the funnel. So it's super interesting, Kiva, that the way you have it set up by part of the funnel, pre-sales, in-flight opportunity, post-sales, conversion, adoption, as well as by role.
I'm curious with regard to your organization, if it's synchronous or asynchronous learning, how do you combine sort of classroom setting and with the asynchronous learning model? And then how do you measure how behaviors change as a result of going through whatever course?
This is the $1 million question, because you'll get different perspectives from different sellers and different leaders, sales leaders, about quote unquote, how much time or how much bandwidth their team has for the synchronous type settings. It's super important to do live trainings, live enablement, to have the sellers hear from other people in the field about how they are learning and the types of things that they're doing to find success. And so we always try and make room, not a ton, not, hours and hours every week, but maybe once or twice a month, we try and have a live hour-long session, no more than that, where we're going through, here's what's coming from marketing, here's what you need to do from a sales process standpoint, basically all those cascading things, all supported by asynchronous, just-in-time type enablement that people can go to, if they have a meeting coming up with a chief financial officer and they need to understand the new value prop in today's, macroeconomic climate for a CFO, they can go and access that little 5 or 10 minute hit, get what they need, understand where the content is, and make a different or have a different approach in that setting. And then measurement is hard. Measurement is so hard. And we try and draw parallels between the people that do the async learnings and get the trainings, get the enablement, get the badges and all those types of things. We try and draw correlation or connection with the outcomes that they receive, but it's an imperfect science, honestly. I'd love to hear. Same question back to you.
I think I would agree with everything you just said. I mean, we do the same, right? So you start out an AlphaSense onboarding, right? And then you move into a slightly less intense, but still somewhat intense period. We call it performance ramp, where an enablement team member is spending time with you, certifying you on new and different things. There's peer learning, there's management presentations. And then there's the beginnings of, because the first 3 weeks is mostly in classroom, if you will, or over Zoom, but like live training. You move into this asynchronous learning model where there are a number of courses and modules that you need to get through in order to feel as though you're graduating 12 weeks later. So performance ramp lasts 12 weeks. Mm-hmm. And then you're into ongoing sales effectiveness, which is effectively the rest of your career at AlphaSense, and how you're supported by some classroom or synchronous learning, some of the asynchronous sort of short and long videos that we've put into our LMS and people can use whenever they need. We have a point system that, grades sort of how many of these you're watching and by when. But most important to me is the connection between, and this is where the behavior changes are really sort of measured and how we can kind of report back what's working, what's not working, or is it resulting in sort of more productive sellers. The relationship between sales enablement and sales management, that has to be really tight, right? What I've found is sales managers will at times rely too heavily on the sales enablement team to do the training and then to measure the results. And that doesn't work. There has to be tight coordination between the two where together, one, the sales manager owns the training. They own the idea that you've got to be better at this very specific thing, and have partnered with the sales enablement team to come up with the training for that very specific thing. Now, the training may be delivered by the enablement person, or the video may have been created by that person, or the test may have been, created by that person and even graded by that person. But now there has to be, okay, this person is now graduated from this very specific training. Let's see how they do when they apply it in the field. The sales manager has to report back to the sales enablement person so that I hear whether or not it's working. And so that's the loop that we generally have. I have very, very close relationships with the folks on the enablement team and of course with the sales management team. So everyone is sort of reporting back on whether or not this training is working for this individual or for this very specific function.
I love that you said that, Kiva, because if the sales leadership is not bought in, and specifically, I think the frontline managers got to be really bought in because they're going to be the ones that do all the reinforcement. And if they're not bought in on the enablement that's happening, if they don't think it's something that their team actually needs, then guess what? Their team isn't actually going to get it. They might sit through the live training, but it's going to be in one ear and out the other. And all that effort that you put in upstream, it all falls apart downstream because that reinforcement isn't there. So one, making sure that your managers are giving input to the enablement team to guide the curriculum to make sure it's actually what their field needs, gives you too the reinforcement that's going to come from the managers and make sure that they're actually making sure that the lessons learned are being applied in the field.
Yeah, we highlighted on, we have a weekly kickoff call every Monday morning called RevOps, where we highlight who's top of the leaderboard in terms of the training that they're getting. And we make the correlation between those folks at the top of the training leaderboard and the folks at the top of the leaderboard, revenue leaderboard, meetings leaderboard, pipeline leaderboard, right? And so you can begin to see that those top 10 people are also the top 10 people here. We also have emails that get sent out company-wide or at least revenue team-wide from each of the managers around who's doing what training, who's accomplished what module, and how that's correlating to performance. And so it's this constant reinforcement over email in our kickoffs of what you need to do. What are the KPIs that lead to pipeline, lead to revenue, and confirming that the folks who are being asked to do are actually doing it.
And you do not need a 10-person enablement team. For those of you listening who are like, shoot, I don't have those resources. It's just me and a couple managers. That's fine. You get leverage from documentation. You get leverage by having a POV on how these types of things should happen. So Kiva, I wouldn't be surprised to hear that your POV on the SEAL training camp for onboarding is probably what ended up manifesting and becoming the way that it runs. And like leaders have to have that. So you don't wait to have really well-formed enablement team to start documenting things. Put that onus on yourself, put that onus on your sales leadership to get pen to paper on the types of things that you need your reps to know and be scrappy. Make it happen. You have to in this environment.
I would say the same is true for recruiting, right? Like you often rely too heavily on your internal recruiting team or external recruiters to find people to fill out your team. And that's just not right. In very much the same way you describe owning sales enablement and then hiring a sales enablement person or team to fulfill the promise, it's your job to go out and source and attract top talent to come join your team. As a frontline manager, middle level manager, as a senior leader, the team is yours. And so I would say in very much the same way, everyone should be spending time on LinkedIn or in Pavilion or whatever groups you may be part of, sourcing and attracting talent to fill out their teams and not relying on other folks who may work for your company and provide you with assistant to do that job for you. I think that's really well said. You're right about that.
I can't remember who it was. It was either Jeff Bezos or Steve Jobs said something very similar to that, Kiva. They said, your job as a leader is 40% recruiting, 40% teaching, and 20% doing your job. It's like, it's so true. Like without a high functioning team and without you bestowing your knowledge to the people that you have on your team, what are you doing? You're never going to be able to scale yourself. You are infinitely unscalable. And so you have to find ways to find that leverage. And I know it's not the most glamorous advice in the world, but documentation and putting your thoughts to paper and getting things down and to systematize is such an unlock. That's the enablement thread. Let's talk now about revenue operations and how you can get leverage out of the RevOps team. Again, tell us a little bit about your team structure and then take us through the 6-year evolution at AlphaSense.
17-person revenue operations team at this point, but it started with just one. And they measure every facet of the business for us, from top of the funnel all the way through to renewal and upsell, giving us the data that we need to inform every decision that we make. And so as we think about, we talked earlier about verticals and sub-verticals. We've expanded globally over these 6 years. So we were majority US. We've got a big presence in the UK. We have an office in Frankfurt. We just opened an office in Singapore. And of course, we cover financial services, corporates, consulting, and sort of every large company with any degree of complexity could be a client of AlphaSense. So building territories and thinking about the TAM or the SAM within each territory relative to the targets that we're setting for that territory or for that AE. But much more than that, as we think about sort of like the velocity of opportunities as they move down a funnel, as we think about a pipeline and what are the deals that make up that pipeline, deals over 100K, for instance, deals or opportunities by reps who are here for less than 6 months, opportunities that exist in countries where we've never done any business, opportunities in high performing verticals or lower performing verticals, right? And so as you think about every facet of the pipeline and the market that we're going after and delivering back to me, and even more important than me, delivering back to the sellers and the sales managers all the information that they need to forecast accurately. And so what I'd say the RevOps team has been able to do for us, most importantly, is create a predictable business. They've helped me predict the business and therefore be able to continue to invest in new and different things in our business. Rely so heavily on our RevOps team to feed me with the information I need to make good decisions.
I love to hear that. And in the early days at AlphaSense, I'm curious, Kiva, not flying blind necessarily, but some of the bets that you were making were probably more based on your experience or maybe based on your gut or on your kind of read of the market. It sounds like now, fast forward 6 years, the decisions you're making are pretty much based on the data that you have, the insights that you have, the confidence that you have to go and find success in a new area by replicating success you've had in others. Is that a fair way to characterize the evolution?
Yeah. Nothing is based on gut anymore or instinct. We're as data and process driven an organization as I've ever been part of. And for the Rev org, that is without a doubt led by RevOps. It's not just the data that they look at every single day, whether it's in Tableau or Salesforce, feeding me back information about what I need to know about this rep, this team, not just that they're delivering that information on a regular basis to me. And we're using that to think about hiring or territory creation or comp plans or spiffs or just general incentive structure. But every single Sunday night, I get an eyes and ears email from our RevOps team, the two heads of RevOps for AlphaSense, who share with me what they may be seeing or hearing in the field that I need to pay attention to. And that might be the most important email I get all week is the eyes and ears email from RevOps, because they're so close to the ground where they're hearing things that I may not be. And we're running so fast from Monday through Friday that sometimes we may miss it in our one-on-one, or I may not have had a conversation with the team responsible for selling that thing. And so getting them to share that with me on a Sunday night so I can be aware of what may be going on. And it's not just about the pipeline or the forecast or the territory or the deals. It's also about the people and how they're feeling and how they're responding to, the rollout of a new comp plan or a new sales manager who may have been hired, or the fact that this person may have been put on a PIP, or anything and everything that they think I might need to know to inform a decision that I might be making over the next couple of weeks is part of that email, that conversation. Invaluable.
That eyes and ears email, this is a topic for the next episode that we have you on, Kiva. I want to dissect that because that is super interesting and what a great way to stay plugged in. But unfortunately, we're running out of time. We have one other topic to hit, which is super interesting. We've mentioned a couple of times that your role as CRO and president at AlphaSense. And the president component of that is much more about the strategy overall of the company. And you mentioned that you have a really interesting go-to-market incubator program to try and determine where to push the chips on the table. Where should you make the next bet? So talk to us about your role as president, how it jives with your role as CRO, and then about this go-to-market incubator you have.
As president and CRO, I'm constantly thinking about strategic direction for the organization, how we take our business into new markets, how we bolt on new products, how we think about gaining a share of market, share of customer. And so I would say alongside the rest of the ELT, alongside Jack, our CEO, we are thinking about inorganic growth strategies all the time. So if you think about sort of like where we've come from, all of our growth over the course of the last 10 years and 6 years since I've been here has been organic. Hire a salesperson, you give them a territory, give them a target, and they run. Over the last year and a half, we've made 2 really successful acquisitions. We bought a company called Stream, an expert transcript library business, and integrated that into AlphaSense. And that has become the 4th voice in our platform. If you think about what a strategy executive or what a hedge fund analyst needs to read or consume before making a decision. They need to hear from the analysts. What are the analysts saying about this thing, this theme, this trend, this market, this product, this ticker? The journalists, and they get that through sell-side research. The journalists, they get that through news, and the company themselves, like they want to understand sort of what companies are saying about themselves. And so they get that through SEC filings and through company presentations. And they also need to talk to experts or hear from experts. And so we bought this company called Stream, expert transcript library business, and integrated that into the AlphaSense platform. Now you've got these 4 voices. So really strategic acquisition for us. We bought a company called Sentio about a year ago. And Sentio has some amazing functionality that we are in the midst of integrating into the AlphaSense platform and will begin to help us extend into new and different personas inside of our client firms, people that we've not yet sold to, but we absolutely could. And so when I talked about sort of under penetration earlier in the conversation, this is a way for us to go deeper and wider inside of our client firms. And so a lot of what I'm doing alongside Jack is thinking about inorganic growth strategies, other M&A, channel partnerships, other kinds of things to help us accelerate our growth. But apart from all that, we also spun up about 3 years ago a team dedicated to incubating and launching new ideas, new stuff. And so this team is led by a woman named Sarah Flaccavento. She's extraordinary. She and her team are responsible for helping us think about this new idea. So actually, if I back up a minute, 3 or 4 years ago, we were diluted as an ELT, as an executive team, because we were having to think about these ideas and try to figure out how to incubate them while also running the business. And so that was distracting and diluting. And so we spun up this team. It was previously called the go-to-market strategy team. It's now called the strategic initiatives team. But either way, the team is responsible for doing exactly that. So whether it's an M&A target, we just opened an office in Singapore, so it's a market that we want to enter, or it's a content set that may appeal to a new, very specific persona that we want to sell to. They're out there testing for us. Conversations with customers, conversations with prospects, interviews with AEs and AMs and folks on the ground. And they launch whatever that new idea may be in a sort of an incubated setting, just a few customers or a few prospects or a few sellers, and see if it works. And if it works, then we begin to move to the next phase, which is launching more broadly. And so they have 15 to 20 initiatives at any given time. And Sarah and team report to the ELT on a weekly basis where they are against each of these initiatives. And it really does free us up to be more strategic and more focused on running the business. I'd say the other thing is there's no shortage of good ideas. Like I am constantly receiving emails and calls from folks who want to help us take our business into Middle East Africa, want to have us sell to business schools or to government or anything and everything. And they're all good ideas. But the challenge for me historically has been keeping focus on, that which we haven't yet mastered, but we're working like hell, to try to be really good at, and also explore these new and different areas where there may be an opportunity to unlock TAM. And so the go-to-market team is able to do that for me. We can focus on running the business while they investigate these other ideas and determine whether or not these ideas are worth pressing the gas pedal down on.
That's amazing. I would love to probe into this topic for a much more time. We need to get more time together, Kiva. For the time being, I want to be mindful that we unfortunately are out of time. And so I've got one last bonus question for you, which is curious to hear about a book. This could be a business book, it could be a novel, it could be a biography, whatever it is. A book that's been really influential for you in your career, and why?
Yeah, influential I wouldn't say because I just read it, but it's Unreasonable Hospitality, The Remarkable Power of Giving People More Than They Expect. You'll have to find the author. I can't remember who wrote it, but it's about delivering on the promise, over-delivering on the promise, and thinking about, ours is a land and expand strategy at AlphaSense. And so we get in with a few seats or a dozen seats, and we want to expand to hundreds or thousands of seats over time. And the only way we do that is by delivering or over-delivering on the value, right? So giving the customer an absolutely amazing experience in working with AlphaSense, which then gets them to talk about that experience, or at least have us share those value stories, those experiences with others within the same firm who are evaluating our platform. And so this book goes into some great detail about the kinds of things that you can do to deliver or over deliver on the promise. And it's all about hospitality, but of course you can use that in whatever, business that you're in.
Absolutely. You're the second person to recommend this book, which means
Oh, wow.
it's officially time for me to go and pick it up. I believe the author is Will Guidara. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that last name correctly. Where can people go to learn more about you and to learn more about
Please
AlphaSense?
connect with me on LinkedIn. Go to our website. We're hiring like crazy. We're growing like crazy. I mentioned Singapore and Frankfurt, new offices, but in the US and in Europe, I would love to connect with anyone and everyone. So please reach out.
Really appreciate that, my friend. Thank you so much for the time. That's a wrap for this episode of the Run Revenue Show. We will catch you next week.
Don't let what you heard today go to waste. Take 2 minutes to download today's checklist to get your priorities in line for the week. You can find that linked in our show notes. And if you liked what you heard, make sure you give us a 5-star rating and leave a review. We'll be back next Monday with more to help you win your week.